Hollywood A-lister Brad Pitt storms off Jimmy Kimmel Live after explosive confrontation with host over personal attacks and inappropriate questions about his custody battle and mental health struggles. The atmosphere in the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was electric as Brad Pitt walked onto the stage, his signature smile masking what would soon become one of the most uncomfortable television moments in recent memory. The audience erupted in applause, completely unaware that they were about to witness a career-defining meltdown that would send shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond. Kimmel, known for his sharp wit and sometimes cutting humor, seemed unusually aggressive from the moment Pitt settled into the guest chair. The interview began innocuously enough, with standard promotional questions about Pitt's latest film project. But seasoned viewers could sense an underlying tension in Kimmel's demeanor, a predatory gleam in his eyes that suggested he had come prepared for battle rather than conversation. "So, Brad," Kimmel began, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there during his opening monologue, "you've been keeping a pretty low profile lately. Some might say you've been hiding from the public eye." The comment hung in the air like a loaded weapon, and Pitt's smile faltered almost imperceptibly. "I wouldn't say hiding, Jimmy," Pitt replied carefully, his media-trained instincts kicking in. "I've been focusing on my work and my family. That's what matters most to me right now." But Kimmel wasn't satisfied with the diplomatic response. He leaned forward in his chair, his body language becoming more confrontational by the second. "Right. Your family. Speaking of which, how's that whole custody situation working out for you? Must be tough having your dirty laundry aired in public. Like that." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the lighthearted banter they had come to expect from late-night television. Even the production crew behind the cameras exchanged worried glances, sensing that their host was veering dangerously off-script. Pitt's jaw tightened visibly, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "Jimmy, I think we should stick to discussing the film. That's why I'm here tonight." "Oh, come on, Brad," Kimmel pressed, his voice taking on a mocking tone that sent a chill through the studio. "Your fans want to know the real you. They want to know about the Brad Pitt who allegedly has anger management issues, who allegedly had substance abuse problems. Isn't that more interesting than another superhero movie?" The word allegedly dripped with sarcasm, making it clear that Kimmel wasn't asking genuine questions, but rather making thinly veiled accusations. The studio audience, initially confused by the hostile turn, began to murmur among themselves. Some looked genuinely concerned, while others seemed drawn to the train wreck unfolding before their eyes. Pitt took a deep breath, his years of experience in handling difficult interviews evident in his measured response. "Jimmy, I've been open about my struggles and my journey toward becoming a better person. I've taken responsibility for my mistakes, done the work, and I'm proud of the progress I've made. But I'm not here to relitigate my personal life on television." The response was dignified, professional, and should have been enough to steer the conversation back to safer ground. But Kimmel seemed determined to push every button he could find. His next words would prove to be the spark that ignited an inferno. "Oh, you've done the work, have you?" Kimmel said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call hiding behind expensive lawyers and PR teams while your kids suffer? Real noble work there, Brad. I'm sure they're really proud of dear old Dad right about now." The studio fell silent except for the hum of the cameras. Even the most seasoned entertainment industry veterans in the audience had never witnessed such a brazen attack on a guest's character and family. Pitt's face went through a series of emotions: shock, hurt, and then something much more dangerous: barely contained rage. "That's enough," Pitt said, his voice low and threatening. "You want to come after me? Fine. But you leave my children out of this. They didn't ask for any of this, and they sure as hell don't deserve to have their father attacked on national television by some two-bit comedian who thinks cruelty passes for humor." The insult hit its mark. Kimmel's face flushed red, and his carefully constructed television persona began to crack. "Two-bit comedian? That's rich coming from someone whose biggest acting achievement lately has been playing the victim in his own divorce proceedings. The gloves were officially off. What had started as an uncomfortable interview had devolved into a full-scale verbal warfare, with both men abandoning all pretense of civility. The production team scrambled to figure out whether to cut to commercial, but the train wreck was too compelling to stop. Pitt stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor, with a sound that echoed through the silent studio. "You know what, Jimmy? I came here tonight to promote a film and have a pleasant conversation. I didn't come here to be ambushed by someone who clearly has his own issues to work through." "Sit down, Brad," Kimmel commanded, his voice rising. "We're not done here. You agreed to do this interview, so let's finish it. Unless you're planning to run away from this conversation like you've run away from everything else in your life." The accusation of cowardice was the final straw. Pitt's composure, held in check through years of media training and personal growth work, finally snapped completely. "Run away?" Pitt's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than any shout could have. "You want to talk about running away, Jimmy? Let's talk about how you hide behind your writers, your teleprompter, and your carefully orchestrated show format because you're too much of a coward to have a real conversation with anyone." The studio gasped collectively. In the world of late-night television, guests simply didn't attack hosts this directly. It was career suicide, social suicide, and yet Pitt seemed past caring about any of that. His eyes blazed with an intensity that reminded everyone in the room why he had been cast as so many complex, dangerous characters throughout his career. Kimmel's face went from red to purple. "Excuse me? This is my show, my house, and you're a guest here. I suggest you remember that before you say something you'll really regret." "Your house?" Pitt laughed, but there was no humor in it. "This isn't your house, Jimmy. This is a television studio owned by a network that pays you to entertain people, not to publicly humiliate them for your own sick amusement. And right now, you're failing at your job spectacularly." The audience was split between those who were recording on their phones and those who sat in stunned silence. Security guards near the edges of the stage shifted nervously, unsure whether they should intervene in what was rapidly becoming the most talked-about television moment in years. Kimmel stood up as well, trying to match Pitt's intimidating presence, but falling short. "You know what? You're right. This is entertainment. And watching you have a meltdown on live television is exactly the kind of entertainment America needs. It shows them who you really are when the cameras aren't rolling on your movie sets." "Who I really am." Pitt took a step closer to Kimmel's desk, his voice rising for the first time. "I'm someone who's worked every day for the past 5 years to become a better man, a better father, and a better human being. I've admitted my mistakes, sought help, and tried to make amends. What have you done, Jimmy? Besides sit behind this desk and tear down people who are actually trying to do something meaningful with their lives?" The personal attack hit home. Kimmel's carefully crafted public persona began to crumble as his own insecurities bubbled to the surface. "Meaningful? You make movies, Brad. You pretend to be other people for money. Don't act like you're saving the world." "At least I'm not making a living by destroying people's reputations for cheap laughs," Pitt shot back. "Do you know how many careers you've damaged with your mean-spirited monologues? How many people you've hurt just to get a few seconds of applause from an audience that will forget your name the moment they leave this building?" The production team was in full panic mode. The director was frantically signaling to cut to commercial, but Kimmel waved him off. His ego wouldn't let him back down now, even as the interview spiraled completely out of control. "Those people deserved what they got," Kimmel snarled. "Just like you deserve this. You Hollywood elites think you're untouchable, that your money and fame protect you from consequences. Well, here's a news flash. The American people are tired of your sanctimonious bullshit." "The American people?" Pitt's voice was incredulous. "You don't speak for the American people, Jimmy. You're just a bitter comedian who never made it as an actor and now takes out his frustrations on people who did. This isn't about entertainment or holding celebrities accountable. This is about your own failures and inadequacies." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kimmel's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, his brain struggling to process the devastating accuracy of Pitt's psychological diagnosis. The audience could sense that something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic between the two men. "Get out," Kimmel whispered, his voice barely audible over the studio's ventilation system. "What?" Pitt leaned forward, cupping his ear theatrically. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Could you speak up? Or are you going to whisper your way through this conversation like you whisper your way through life?" "I said get out!" Kimmel screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. "Security! Get this man out of my studio right now!" But the security guards hesitated. They had witnessed the entire exchange, and it was clear to everyone present that Kimmel had been the aggressor from the beginning. Pitt had simply defended himself against an unprovoked attack, and now Kimmel was trying to have him forcibly removed for refusing to be a victim. Pitt smiled for the first time since the interview began, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who had just won a battle they never wanted to fight. "Don't worry, Jimmy, I'm leaving. But not because you told me to. I'm leaving because I have standards, and sitting in this chair for another second would compromise them." He turned to face the audience directly, ignoring Kimmel completely. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize that you had to witness this. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you got a masterclass in how not to conduct yourself as a professional. I hope your evening improves from here." The audience burst into spontaneous applause, something that had never happened during a Jimmy Kimmel live taping when the applause wasn't prompted by the warm-up comedian or cue cards. It was genuine organic appreciation for Pitt's dignity in the face of Kimmel's unprofessional behavior. Kimmel's face went white as he realized the audience was applauding his guest and, by extension, condemning him. "Don't you dare walk away from me!" he shouted desperately. "We're not finished here!" But Pitt was already walking toward the exit, his stride confident and unhurried. He had said everything he needed to say, and staying any longer would only give Kimmel more opportunities to embarrass himself. As he reached the edge of the stage, he paused and looked back one final time. "You know what the saddest part about all of this is, Jimmy?" Pitt's voice carried across the silent studio with crystal clarity. "I actually used to respect you. I thought you were funny, authentic, someone who genuinely cared about entertaining people. But tonight, you've shown everyone exactly who you really are when the spotlight gets too bright for your insecurities to hide." The words hit Kimmel like physical blows. His hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk, knuckles white with the strain of trying to maintain some semblance of control. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of his public humiliation for posterity. "5 years ago, I would have fought back with the same venom you've shown tonight," Pitt continued, his voice steady and measured. "I would have said things designed to hurt you as deeply as you've tried to hurt me. But I've learned something in those 5 years that you apparently never have. Real strength isn't about tearing other people down. It's about lifting yourself up." A woman in the front row began to cry. Whether from the raw emotion of the moment or the second-hand embarrassment of watching a man destroy his own career on live television, it was impossible to tell. The crying seemed to break some kind of spell, and suddenly half the audience was reaching for tissues or wiping their eyes. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to regain control of the situation. "This is all very touching, Brad, but you're still the same narcissistic actor who—" "Stop!" The single word from Pitt cut through Kimmel's sentence like a knife. "Just stop talking, Jimmy. Every word you say right now is making this worse for you. Your producers are probably already planning damage control meetings. Your network executives are calculating how much this is going to cost them in advertiser revenue. And your family is going to have to watch their father and husband reveal himself to be a bully on national television. The mention of family struck home harder than any of the previous insults. Kimmel's wife and children would indeed see this footage, and the realization seemed to drain the last of his fight. His shoulders sagged as the full weight of what he had done began to settle in. "But here's what I want you to remember," Pitt said, his voice softening slightly. "It doesn't have to end here. You can choose to learn from this moment. You can choose to be better. The same way I had to choose to be better when my life fell apart. The difference is, I did it in private. You're doing it in front of millions of people." The audience sat in absolute silence, hanging on every word. This wasn't the explosive finale they had expected. Instead, they were witnessing something far more powerful, a masterclass in grace under pressure, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from having been broken and rebuilt. "I forgive you for tonight, Jimmy. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger would make me the kind of person I used to be. The kind of person I never want to be again." Pitt's eyes swept across the studio one final time. "I hope someday you can forgive yourself too." With that, he turned and walked off the stage, disappearing behind the curtain that separated the performance space from the backstage area. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the silence until even that faded away, leaving only the hum of the studio lights and the collective breathing of 300 stunned audience members. Kimmel stood frozen behind his desk, his mouth slightly open, looking like a man who had just watched his entire world collapse in real time. The cameras continued to roll, but he seemed to have forgotten they were there. His usual quick wit, his practiced comebacks, his arsenal of sharp-tongued responses, all of it had abandoned him when he needed it most. The stage manager finally made the decision that should have been made 20 minutes earlier and signaled for the cameras to cut. But the damage was already done. The footage would be dissected, analyzed, and replayed endlessly across social media platforms before the night was over. As the studio lights dimmed and the audience began to file out, in hushed whispers, Kimmel remained at his desk, staring at the spot where Pitt had been sitting. The guest chair looked strangely empty now, like a crime scene after the detectives had finished their work. The show's producers rushed onto the stage, their faces masks of barely controlled panic. Phone calls would need to be made. Statements would need to be prepared, and somehow they would need to figure out how to salvage what remained of their host's reputation. But in the quiet moments before the chaos truly began, before the spin doctors and damage control experts took over, there was just Jimmy Kimmel sitting alone on a stage, confronted for perhaps the first time in his career with the true cost of his cruelty. The man who had built his reputation on tearing others down had finally met someone who refused to be torn down. And in that refusal, in Pitt's dignified response to provocation, the audience had seen what real strength looked like. By morning, the clip would have millions of views. Late-night comedy shows would dissect every moment. Social media would be flooded with opinions and hot takes. But none of that noise would change what had happened in this studio tonight. A bully had been exposed, not through violence or matching cruelty, but through the simple act of refusing to participate in his game. And sometimes, that refusal is the most powerful response of all. The confrontation was over, but its impact would reverberate through Hollywood and beyond for months to come, serving as a stark reminder that in an industry built on image and reputation, character still matters most.